Welcome back, everyone. And we're now going to start our third session. So it's the closing session of this workshop. And we're going to cover EMA's role in coordinating the expert panels for high-risk medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. The session will be co-chaired by Alexis Nolte, who's head of Human Medicines Division at the EMA, and Ana-Eva Ampelas, who's head of Unit of Medical Devices at the European Commission. So welcome, and I hand over to Ana-Eva and Alexis for co-chairing this session. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fergus. So it is my pleasure to welcome everyone to this session. And I'm co-chairing today with Ana-Eva Ampelas. So as you will hear in this session, the new regulation provides EMA with the legal basis for the coordination role of the EU expert panels for the clinical and performance evaluation of certain high-risk medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. So initially, the secretariat of these expert panels was provided by the European Commission Joint Research Center, and we have just transitioned that responsibility to EMA successfully as of 1st of March this year. So we have received, in advance of this session, we have received information from our stakeholders that the main question is to better understand what the regulation is about and how these panels will operate. So we will spend all the time we need to give you this information in the presentation. And then we have an expert. We have a panel of very distinguished and experienced people who will then be able to address any questions you may have after the presentation. So with this, Ana-Eva, you want to extend your welcome?
Thank you, Alexis, and well, huge welcome from my side as well. I'm very glad to have been invited to this panel. As Alexis said, I mean, we have been working from the DG Santé side very closely together with JRC, who managed the secretariat in the preparatory phase and also in the starting phase of the panels. We have been witness to the very smooth handover that is now taking place from JRC to EMA. I would just say that I think for us and from the Commission side, this is a very, very important step for the overall implementation of the medical devices regulations, the MDR and the IVDR, and it is a very, very, very important priority because the expert panels really play an essential role in increasing the requirements of the regulations and thereby also hiring the safety and high level of health, which is very, very essential. So a huge thanks not only to everybody who is participating, but also to JRC and to EMA for the smooth work, and also to the experts. And I know that we have some in the panel today, which is really good as well, because they have really invested a lot in the work. And I think that the entire medical devices regulation and area will really benefit a lot from their very extensive expertise in the area. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana-Eva. And yeah, I would like to reiterate as well, it was an absolutely fantastic collaboration in transitioning the responsibilities, and it was seamless overall. So this was a great effort. So now I would like to introduce my colleague Sylvie da Rocha Diaz, who is coordinating the implementation of the expert panels at EMA within the Human Medicines Division. Sylvie will provide us, the background on how the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics are regulated in Europe, and explain the timelines and actions needed to implement additional tasks and activities under EMA's extended mandate. So with this, Sylvie, I welcome you to the session, and we are very eager to listen to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexis. And good afternoon to everyone. My name is Sylvie da Rocha Diaz, and it's my pleasure to be here today to present the topic on the expert panels on high-risk medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. So in the next slide is the outline of my presentation. I will start with a brief background of the medical device regulation and then expand on the expert panels in the framework of the regulation for medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, provide the one-year review of the work of the expert panels, and describe the new mandate of the EMA in the context of the coordination of the expert panels, with some brief remarks in conclusion. Now, in the EU, it is estimated that there are approximately 500,000 medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. The previous regulatory framework of 3 separate directives was replaced by 2 regulations, one regulation on medical devices and the other on in vitro diagnostics. So with effect on the 26th of May 2021, the regulation 2017-745 on medical devices replaced the Council directive on the active implantable medical devices and also the Council directive on medical devices. And with effect of 26th of May 2022, the regulation 2017-746 on the in vitro diagnostic medical devices will replace the directive on these in vitro diagnostic devices after a transition period. Now, as mentioned in the previous presentations today, also it's important to note that the extended mandate on the reinforcement of the EMA's role in this crisis preparedness and management of medicinal products as well as medical devices came into effect on the 1st of March 2022. Now we move on to see what are the types of devices, medical devices, that are within the scope of the expert panels. So here we see that the classification of medical devices is based on a risk-based approach, which takes into account the use of technical and manufacturer characteristics of the device. The MDR describes the classification into 4 risk groups, with also additional 22 rules on how to classify the medical devices. Now, in general, for class 1 medical devices, these are very low risk devices, and it includes, for example, stethoscopes, wheelchairs, and corrective glasses. And these devices do not require notified bodies and are self-certified. As we go up in the risk class, we have class 2A, and these include devices such as syringes with needles, surgical gloves, clamps, and also suction pumps. And these devices would require a notified body conformity assessment. Now, some of these devices in class 2 and implantable devices in class 3 are the devices that are within the scope of the expert panels. For the class 2, it is only for the devices that follow the Rule 12, which are devices used to administer or remove medicinal products. And here we have as examples ventilators, infusion pumps, anesthesia machines. And for class 3 implantables, these devices also include breast implants, surgical meshes, joint replacements or spinal disc replacements, as well as prosthetic valve devices. These are only a few examples of the medical devices, and a more comprehensive list can be found in the MDCG guidance on classification of medical devices. Now, if we go back a few years, the new legislation on medical device was really the result of a drive for change in the regulation of medical devices caused by 2 major safety signals that were highly publicized and highlighted in the press as well as in academic journals. The first was the metal-on-metal hip replacement implants. So studies show that people who had been fitted with this metal-on-metal type of implant were falling ill due to the release of metal particles of cobalt and chromium metals in the implant. And it caused a condition of where the particles of the metal entered the bloodstream and the soft tissues. Now, the next safety signal was in women who had received a particular type of implant from a manufacturer, PIP, that used industrial low-grade silicone to produce these implants. And the low-grade silicone had not been approved for this particular use. And there were also other problems where many of the implants ruptured. And without traceability, many women were unsure whether they had received these defective implants. So both safety issues highlighted some of the weaknesses in the previous system. Now, the new tools in the regulation are meant to address some of these deficiencies that have been just highlighted. Now, both regulations introduce a much stricter certification procedure and also monitoring of the devices once on the market. Some of the new tools in the regulation include a pre-market obligation for consultation on the clinical evaluation for certain high-risk devices. And this is where the expert panels will come into play, as they provide the mechanism of scrutiny for this assessment for these Class 3 and Class 2B devices. And there's the establishment of a new EU medical device database that will monitor the life cycle of the device, including post-market clinical follow-up data. And better transparency and visibility and traceability of medical devices with the introduction of the unique device identification system, which provides identification of the device on the market and facilitates the traceability to improve patient safety. There's also the introduction of an implant card for patients that offers patients easier access to information about the device that has been implanted. And with this card, patients will have access to safety information through EUDAMED on their medical device. Now, the approval pathway for medical devices is quite complex. And in this presentation, I don't believe that I could do it justice. So there is not enough time to fully describe and appreciate the different aspects and steps of this conformity assessment. But here I provide only a snapshot of the overall approval pathway for medical devices. The manufacturer provides the notified body with this technical dossier for review as part of the procedure for the conformity assessment in order to receive the certification for the CE marking. The notified body, which is designated by an EU country, carries out this task to assess the conformity for certain products before they're placed on the market. And the European Commission publishes such a list of notified bodies. The authorities responsible for the enforcement of the regulation and vigilance remain with the competent authority, and notified bodies are supervised by authorities which are specifically responsible for the notified bodies. And in this process, what is new is EUDAMED, so the electronic system for registration of medical devices, and where information on medical devices will be made available publicly. And there will be information on post-market surveillance and vigilance, on clinical investigations, but also this is where we will also find the availability of the opinions from the expert panels. Now, also within the new legislation on medical devices, next slide please, are the expert panels who now have a role in the process for the conformity assessment. So the manufacturer submits a clinical dossier for medical devices to the notified body, and the notified body drafts what is called a clinical evaluation assessment report, which is the CEAR, which is then submitted to the expert panels via the expert panel secretariat. Now, the expert panels then provide an opinion on this report, and this procedure is called the Clinical Evaluation Consultation Procedure, or CECP. Now, for in vitro diagnostics, the manufacturer provides a performance evaluation report, the PER, which then is submitted to the expert panels for review. The panels will then provide a view on the report, and this is what is called the Performance Evaluation Consultation Procedure, or PECP. The opinions or the views that are provided to the notified body as part of the conformity assessment, which would lead then to the certification and subsequent access to the EU market. Now, the expert panels are organized into 12 different panels. There's a screening panel, 10 thematic panels with subspecialties, and 1 in vitro diagnostic panel. The chairs and vice chairs with representatives of the screening panels also constitute the coordination committee, whose responsibility is really the well-functioning of the panels. The experts that are assigned to the panels come from a central reserve list of experts that have been assigned by the European Commission. Now, what is the role of the expert panels? So next slide, please. Now, their main focus at the moment is really to provide the opinion on the notified body's assessment of the clinical evaluation of certain high-risk medical devices, and to provide the views on the performance evaluation of certain in vitro diagnostics, which I will discuss a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. However, they also have other roles, which are to provide scientific and technical in clinical matters, to contribute to the development of common specifications and guidances, as well as international standards, and to contribute to the identification of concerns and emergent safety and performance issues. But they will also play a role for the preparedness and management of public health emergencies along with the ATF. Now, if we look more closely at the CECP procedure itself, now the notified body starts, the notified body starts with considering first the legal requirements of the particular medical device, and therefore there is a class 3 implantable device or a class 2 device used to administer or remove medicinal products. There are certain exemptions to consider, but if the medical device is found to qualify for the CECP procedure, then it would undergo a first phase of assessment based on one of the 3 criteria listed, but most notably on the novelty criteria with a major impact on clinical or health of patients. If this is confirmed, then the thematic panel would provide an opinion on the clinical evaluation assessment report. Now, the opinion is non-binding and is publicly available on the European Commission's website. The procedure itself lasts a maximum of 60 days once it is assigned to the screening panel. Now, in terms of output, before the 1st of March, there were a total of 25 procedures with 3 scientific opinions for the CCP and 15 scientific views for the PCP that have been published. And in the last month, we've received 5 additional procedures, which are currently ongoing. So I would like to show you now just an example of the work of the expert panels. Here we have, as an example, the first opinion given by the expert panels. And this was an implantable device intended to be used as a bone graft material for the repair or augmentation of bone defects in dental procedures. The expert panels reviewed the clinical evaluation assessment report and provided comments on the length of the study duration, the endpoint used in the study, and the potential immune adverse reaction from the source material. And as well, they commented on the adequacy of the dataset to support the intended use of this particular product. They also recommended in their report additional measures to implement in the post-market clinical follow-up plan. And these recommendations really show that the expert panels provide a certain level of scrutiny over the assessment of the clinical data of the medical device. Now, if we look more closely at the other procedure, which is the Performance Evaluation Consultation Procedure, named PCP, for the in vitro diagnostics. The procedure itself starts with the manufacturer providing the notified body with the performance evaluation report, and then it is then assessed by the expert panels, or the expert panel on specifically the in vitro diagnostics. There are certain exceptions on the IVDs that do not need views of the expert panels, and this is when there's already a common specification which is already available for the same type of device, and if the type of device is already has already been certified. Now, the expert panels provide a non-binding view on the performance of the device, and the advice itself is also publicly available on the European Commission's website. The procedure itself lasts also a maximum of 60 days once it is assigned to the in vitro expert panel. Now, over the past year, the expert panels have provided views on the performance evaluation report of 15 different dossiers of IVDs for the detection and screening of various infectious agents. For example, hepatitis E, West Nile virus, chikungunya, dengue virus, and also notably SARS-CoV-2 IVDs. The expert panels reviewed 5 different IVDs for SARS-CoV-2 that use different detection techniques such as RNA or detection of antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. Now, in the short term, the expert panels are focused, if I can have the next slide, on the 2 procedures as per the legislation, so the CCP and PCP, as we've just discussed. However, in the long term, it is expected that the role of the expert panels will expand to provide scientific advice to the Medical Device Coordination Group, the MDCG, and to the Commission on the safety and performance of high-risk medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, but also to manufacturers, notified bodies, and member states on clinical development strategies and data sets that are needed for the clinical evaluation part of the conformity assessment. Therefore, the expert panels will progressively will be a key source of independent scientific input to many stakeholders in the regulatory framework on the clinical development and data collection on medical devices. Now, the independent scientific contribution from the expert panels will have many benefits and value added to the system. So some of the key benefits, if I can have the next slide. Yes, the previous one. My screen is a bit slow. Some of the key benefits are listed here. There will be greater transparency for patients and healthcare professionals on the clinical assessment performed by the notified body. It will also reinforce the supervisory role of competent authorities with the added mechanism of scrutiny, and will help develop common specifications to support manufacturers and standardize the quality and performance of their devices, which will lead also to better preparedness during a public health crisis. So as of March 1st, next slide, please. The EMA is coordinating the activities of the expert panels, having taken over this role from the Joint Research Center and DG Santé. And over the past year, we have implemented a roadmap on the handover of the expert panels with close interaction and regular meetings to ensure the smooth process of the handover, with many aspects touching upon operational activities of the panels, such as expert contract management and handling of conflict of interest, to the coordination of the procedure management itself of the 2 main procedures, the CCP and PCP. So I can safely say that the handover has been a success with the establishment of the new secretariat of the expert panels at EMA, which is fully operational. So following the excellent collaboration between the different teams. Now, the extended mandate on crisis preparedness and management of medicinal products and medical devices, next slide, please, is really the legal basis upon which the EMA has taken up the responsibility to support and coordinate the activities of these expert panels. And EMA is well placed to perform this important role since it has a long-standing reputation of considerable knowledge in managing experts across the EU in medicinal product regulatory framework. And it offers excellence in the expertise and scientific knowledge on clinical trials because it has an established role as a regulatory agency for medicinal products. It encourages also innovation through various structures, schemes for SMEs to bring these innovative products to patients, such as advanced therapies of medicinal products. And with over 5,000 experts in our database, the EMA has experience in managing competing interests and ensuring impartiality and independence of their scientific opinions. It does all of this with transparency through publication of the scientific opinions, agendas, and minutes of committee meetings to allow the public scrutiny on how these decisions were made. So in conclusion, the expert panels are one of the new tools in the medical device regulation to improve the safety and performance of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics and safeguard the health of patients with increased transparency to patients and healthcare professionals. So the activities of the expert panels are now under the umbrella of the EMA, which has extensive experience in coordinating these expert groups and advisory groups as well as committees. And the new mandate really strengthens and provides further resilience to the EMA's role in preparedness for major public health crises, for the availability of medicinal products as well as medical devices, with the interaction between the ETF and the expert panels. And the expert panels under the coordination of the EMA will lead to a more integrated and synergistic approach for the management of medical devices and improve public health. So I finish here my presentation and I thank you for your attention. So I hand over the floor to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for this very good and clear presentation. First of all, we have a lot of stakeholders participating in this session. We have patients, consumers, healthcare professionals, pharmaceutical and medical devices, industry, academics, and then also a number of national and international competent authorities. First of all, we should invite everybody to send your comments or your questions on the Slido that has been established for this event. We have hashtag EMA extended mandate where you can post. We will open the floor to all the participants afterwards, but first we will have a round with the panelists that have been invited to this session. So we will call upon all the panelists, and you can present yourselves and you can say a few words from your perspective of the expert panels. And after that round of introductions, we will open the floor for questions and comments on this. So I suggest that we first give the floor to Alexandra Dacic-Pilchevich. I hope I got the name right.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra Dacic, and I'm head of department in EMA Information Management Division, with a goal to collaborate with internal and external stakeholders on delivery of a technology portfolio, extensive one that we are planning here in EMA. And in the context of extended mandate and specifically medical devices, we could hear from the previous presentation that the process has been existing on a commission side, and different tools are used that now we are using with the you know, from EMA side, but then with the idea that submissions of dossiers from the notified bodies and publication at the end one day will be a new system that is under development. And then how that all will fit together with our tools that we are developing in order to support the procedures and in the future shortages for medical devices. As you can see, a lot of technical components involved. Maybe they are not you know, blocking on urgent point when it comes to panels described, but definitely something that we will be working on in the coming years with the goal to set up more sustainable technology around all these procedures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. We can now go to Claudius Griesinger from JRC.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me well. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Claudius Griesinger. I'm working for the European Commission Joint Research Center. And maybe just one or two words on the Joint Research Center. This is a Director General of the Commission. It's the Science and Knowledge Service of the Commission. So we don't have a policy agenda, but we basically support policy DGs in regard to the full policy cycle, conception, implementation, monitoring of policies. Also, foresight is an important activity in scientific collaborations. Within the JRC, we have a project. I'm leading that project on emerging health technologies, and we have a long-standing collaboration with DG Santé on the implementation of the two new regulations. We worked on various scientific aspects. We, for instance, work on artificial intelligence and COVID imaging recently, but we done a lot also for the implementations, as I said, like globally acceptable terminology for adverse events, signal detection, use of real-world data, and these things are actually also relevant for some of the key objectives of the regulation, and also relevant for the panels because they will or could use, when available, also decision criteria relating to increased incidence. And we've spent a lot of time with Santé working on setting up, designing, first of all, these panels, setting them up, establishing them in an operational way, writing guidance on decision criteria, importantly on innovation, on novel devices, and then coordinated the panels for the first year. As Sylvie already said, we had about 25 processes basically fed through, importantly also some COVID assays, but also important other medical devices. And maybe I close now to say a few words on the panels from our perspective. First of all, it's of course a novel element, as Anna-Eva already said, and it's a key element of the legislative framework. It brings together really an incredible brain power in clinical and scientific terms, and that's fantastic. First of all, there are lots of roles for the expert panels in the regulation. Sylvie alluded to these, and I think what is really critical with these consultations that are now in place, we have for the first time an element where independent clinical experts look actually at data quality, at sufficiency of clinical evidence for high-risk devices before they're used in patients. And that advice is being used by notified bodies, but it also informs the member states' mechanism of scrutiny, where member states have a lot of possibility to look actually at these new novel devices that come on the market, and could also request actually further advice from panels. Important is also this early advice. I think everybody is keen probably on that. The panels may advise on the clinical development strategies for companies if companies want that. And I think what is really critical is to see the panels as a really constructive new element within a wider community, of course, of industry, notified bodies, scientific community, to really walk the line between safety, enhanced safety, but also maintaining innovativeness. That's absolutely critical. We have a very innovative sector in the EU. We have to maintain that. I close with saying that I think there is a clear expectation and a fantastic opportunity that the panels will learn with the community about data, experiences with novel devices, and develop then actually benchmarks, basically common specifications that provide clarity for all the players to improve, hopefully, the clinical data that are associated with new devices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudius. And now, Niall McLean from HPRA, please.
Thank you, Anna-Eva, and good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you very much to the EMA for inviting me to participate in this panel session today. Like has been reflected in the previous speeches, I would very much see the expert panels as being a key pillar to the new regulatory system defined by MDR and IVDR. And we very much welcomed their establishment back in Q2 of last year. And I must recognize all of the work that the Commission, Anna-Eva and her team, and indeed in particular Claudius and his team at the JRC have put into bringing us to this point. And I very much look forward now to the transition to EMA and what that will bring. From a regulator's perspective at HPRA, we would very much see the regulations and the objectives as being there to improve and enhance the safety of patients and citizens using medical devices to protect public health, and also to find that balance to provide an environment to support innovation, one and a regulatory system that is consistent and transparent. And the expert panels really have very important roles in providing a scientific, a clinical advisory foundation to achieving those objectives. The expert panels can help afford independence, expertise, and really provide a common platform on scientific and clinical knowledge to bring the system forward to the next regulatory framework. As the previous speakers have outlined, the CECP and the PECP, the two consultation procedures described in the regulations, have been the focus to date, and it will be very interesting and very useful, I think, to get feedback on the reviews that are ongoing about the experience to date to ensure that the panels can operate effectively and that we can continue to ensure that the assessments, I guess, are done as effectively as possible. I do think to finish up that transferring these functions to the EMA provides a very exciting opportunity, as Sylvie very well outlined in her presentation, the good fit that these expert panels are with the EMA, but also providing a really exciting opportunity to look to further expand the role of the panels in line with the regulations. As Claudius has touched upon many of them, we would very much encourage the prioritization of expanding the role past the consultation procedures. So in particular, really looking to launch a mechanism so that the expert panels can provide advice to innovators, to academics, to micro, small enterprises and other industry on clinical development strategies and innovation of new technologies. I think the expert panels will also have a very crucial role to input to the regulatory system to help define common specifications or guidance specific to medical devices, to help define the specific clinical performance safety criteria that in particular a high-risk medical device should have. And I think that defining those mechanisms for the expert panels would be very important, also in tandem with looking how the system can initiate common specification development, how it can select which devices should be subject to focus for specification development, and how to progress them to finalization. And finally, I think the expert panels really provide a unique opportunity to help improve the safety of medical devices, in particular providing advice and guidance to the regulatory network through the Medical Device Coordination Group, the MDCG, in particular on some of the key safety issues and some of the examples, for instance, that Sylvie outlined in her presentation from a historical perspective would very much have benefited from expert panel advice. But thank you very much again for inviting me to participate, and I very much look forward to the further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niall, for your input. And we now go to the first representative of the expert panel, actually here, Rob Nellison, please.
Okay, thank you, Anna-Eva. It's nice to be here with you. So I'm one of those persons you are talking about in the former speakers. In my daily life, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and a professor in orthopedics at Leiden University Medical Center. Involved in research and implants for already 25 years. I'm the founder of the Dutch Arthroplasty Registry, which is one of the biggest worldwide after the UK, with a 99% completeness. And I think the most important thing I wanted to be involved, and I'm very glad to be selected, is that one of my drivers in daily life is, that's the reason I work in academia and not in private practice, but I still do surgery, is that I try to improve the world still, better patient safety, and get rid of those blind spots of my colleagues and probably also industry and regulators. So we also have this nice grant, this EU grant, the Core MD, you probably heard about it. And hopefully we'll have some nice standards with our Core MD Horizon 2020 project, which is led by Alan Fraser, a cardiologist. And it's a very nice collaboration between orthopedics and cardiology. So I think the role for the experts is, well, hopefully in future we'll have some harmonization on standards on clinical evidence based on science. And when I'm working in my daily life, there is some very interesting discussions about what is clinical evidence. So, and the former speakers already alluded to this. I think it's very nice to use us as experts. And I'm the chairman of the expert panel for orthopedics, trauma, and rheumatology and rehabilitation. Use us to make these standards. At least that's you don't have to ask me. That's something which will originate by itself from my academic background. So we have better patient safety. And I think there's also a misconduct by some surgeons and some people when I talk to people, is that it will stop innovation. I think by the new medical device regulations, it will improve innovation. It will improve innovation for the better and safety of patients with a high quality. My ambition would be we as Europeans or EU set the standards for the rest of the world. That's what I like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. We now go to Olga Polidorou. You are also a representative of the panel.
Hello from my side also. I'm Olga Polidorou. It's nice speaking after Rob because he said a lot of the panels and for the European and the part in the studies. Well, I'm the chair of the screening panel, and for the profession, I'm a dentist. I work also in the university, not in the private practice, where I have the clinical contact with the patients and additionally the research on the material section. I am the head of the preventive and restorative dentistry in the Department of Operative Dentistry. And actually, there is one more point that makes this easy to work here. I'm a member of a lot of the working groups of the DIN and ISO for dentistry. That's why it helps me see how necessary it is to have better standards nowadays. Inside the screening panel, I had the opportunity to work on this medical device that was presented before. We had excellent guidance and help from Claudius and his group. I believe that the use of the panels, as they are here, it can help to make better standards, like Rob said, not everybody, and to have the same standards always for the devices, and to how can I say, to improve the regulations. So I'm excited being here. I want to help to thank you that I'm allowed to be here, and I'm excited for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. We now go to Matthias Niedrig.
Yes. Hello. I'm Matthias Niedrig. I'm from professional virologist and worked a long time in the Robert Koch Institute. Now I'm working for the German accreditation office and in part also as a consultant for the WHO. I have a long experience in the developing diagnostic as well as evaluating diagnostic on quality and sensitivity, I think, for different more or less emerging diseases in the virology field. So, and I'm now co-chair in the EVD panel together and have the pleasure to evaluate around 6 dossiers in the group. So, and together with Claudius, I think we are performing a kind of learning curve, I think, how to best evaluate these assays and dossiers and under certain aspects. And this is, I think, an ongoing exercise at the moment. And it's very exciting. I think it's very important what we have seen also in particular now for SARS-CoV diagnostic, where we see, I think, a great diversity of different assays. And this has, of course, a major impact also on controlling the disease and the outbreak situation. So that's all I want to contribute at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for this input as well. We now go to the last member of the panel here today. It's Oliver Bisazza from MedTech Europe.
Thank you, Anna-Eva. I'm here from MedTech Europe representing the regulated medical device and in vitro diagnostic industry. And from a manufacturer's perspective of these devices and tests, we also see these expert panels as very important. We're very interested to see what the transfer of responsibilities to the EMA will bring, for the simple reason that, as nicely expressed by prior speakers, these panels are a key novel feature of the new regulatory framework for medical devices, which was published nearly 5 years ago. And while, as mentioned, these panels are carrying out some of the duties envisaged for them in the regulations, many of their duties are yet to be rolled out, and we are very eager to see those duties rolled out as soon as possible. So we would very much hope that the transfer of responsibility to EMA will see an acceleration of that process rather than the process being slowed down. To give just one example, it was mentioned already by Niall, and there are definitely manufacturers in our membership who are quite interested to, on a voluntary basis, seek early advice from the panels on their clinical development strategy, because that is seen as one way as giving a bit more predictability to the regulatory assessment and approval of their devices. And that feature of the expert panel system is yet to be rolled out. So that's just one example that we're interested in from a manufacturer's perspective. We're also very interested to see precisely how the EMA will support these panels, because the EMA has a very proven track record in the area of pharmaceuticals, but medical devices and IVDs are fundamentally different, much more diverse and technologically complex. And so while the role of the EMA is primarily an administrative one, we nevertheless hope that the staff recruited and trained to support these panels will have a minimum level of knowledge about how medical devices operate and can support the panelists not only on very administrative tasks, but also in explaining the role and boundaries of the regulations, because a panelist will presumably turn to the EMA if they have questions. Linked to that, and it's the final point I'll make before the Q&A session, the panels will have a large number of duties already foreseen in the regulation, and the amount of working time they can carry out is limited. We would like to see the panel's time and energies focused very strictly on those tasks, because as mentioned by others, they are very important tasks. We do not want to see the panel's roles stretched too much, and we do not want to see the panels deviate from the tasks that they are called out in the regulations to do. And that's why the role of the EMA staff is very important, to ensure that the discussions and words coming out of the panels and all the documents are actually in line with what the regulation has put them there to do. Because the more we broaden the panel's duties and field of activity, the more stretched they can become, and the less likely they are to deliver on the objectives that they were created for. Many more things I can say on this and to elaborate in the Q&A, but I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for this last contribution from the panel. So thanks a lot to all the panelists. We now would like to open the floor, and just to explain that you will be able, for all of those attending via WebEx, you will be able to raise your hand, and please put on the camera and your micro when you're speaking. That makes it a little bit easier to understand each other. You can also type your questions in the chat box that you have, and again you can also put your comments on the slide, and you have the hashtag code on this slide. So we now open the floor. And maybe just to say that there is one very positive comment in the chat that I read, saying that it is positive that the expert panels are now open and operational, which I think is very welcome, and we are very pleased too. That it has started to take opinions and so on.
So I see in the chat, I see a question about shortages of medical devices, and there was a session, of course, on this topic earlier. Just checking maybe with Fergus, if you're here, whether this was a question that had been addressed in the previous panel.
So there are a couple of questions on shortages. One is that I see is in relation to the possibility for patients to report shortages. I think we still have Monica with us, so perhaps Monica, you could comment there.
Yes, thank you, Fergus. Indeed, I think as mentioned also in the chat box, this is not foreseen in the regulation. I do understand that at the national level, national competent authorities do collect information from a number of stakeholders. And if our panelist from this morning is still online, Thierry, maybe you'll be able to give us further details on that. Or indeed, Noel from HPRA.
Sorry, yeah, I'll take that, Monica. Yes, indeed. You know, there are certain levels of information gathered at member state level in relation to potential shortages of medical devices. I guess primarily the regulatory authorities tend not to have shortage roles for medical devices, because it tends to fall to health service providers, and we've seen over the recent years, first through the experience with Brexit and more recently under the pandemic, I guess the need to have very close engagement at national level with our health service providers to discuss, identify, and then hopefully mitigate potential shortages and disruptions to supply. But quite a big challenge, I think.
Okay, and if I may, there's just one second question about the shortages on devices, which is what are the criteria for medical devices to be included for monitoring, preventing, and reporting on their shortages?
So yes, I can try to address that. So in relation to the medical devices, so as we mentioned during the session 1, the scope is only for public health emergencies. So the agency will have a coordinating role only in the case of public health emergencies, and when we are faced with a public health emergency, then we will have to set up a list of categories of critical medical devices. So this is something that we are working towards, preparing a methodology to come up with such list, and we're working with national competent authorities, and we'll also work with our stakeholders to see what is the best way for us to establish such list. We have the learnings from the COVID pandemic, where the European Commission set up a list of COVID-specific critical devices. So that would be one of the starting points that we will use to develop such lists. But this is something that we have to work on the next few months to be prepared when this part of the regulation becomes applicable on the 2nd of February 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Monica. Back to you, Alexei.
Yeah, all right, thank you. So then we also have a question regarding, how the opinions from the panels have been followed by the notified bodies, and I wonder whether it's too early days to be able to respond to this, since this is all quite recent. I was just wondering if we have an answer to this question already, or whether this is still something that we are following. Is there someone in the panel who would like to take that question?
Yeah, I could maybe say something, although Alexis. So I think it's important to understand that the advice being provided to the notified body has to be considered by the notified body by law. So the notified body cannot just ignore it. So important is now that this goes through basically over the tables of the experts at the notified bodies, or at this relevant notified bodies, and they have to consider what to do. I would understand in their client relationship also with the manufacturer. In this concrete example, we don't know. I also don't think that the device has yet been put on the market, but I think what we could contextually maybe discuss briefly is that the notified body, as I said, is obliged to take the advice of the panel into consideration. If they have another view, they are then obliged actually to write up a justification why or to which extent they have or have not taken up some of the advice or recommendations from the expert panels. And also this justification will go to the member states for the mechanism for scrutiny, so that the member states, once the device actually is registered or the certification is closed, can see what actually the notified body did with the panel advice, and there could be potentially activities then if necessary. So it's important that there is, as Sylvie outlined, the panel advice is not legally binding, but the notified body is obliged to take it into consideration and also to justify if they don't follow the advice. And I think it's a good element indeed for this scrutiny of how the clinical evaluation basically is hopefully improving. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Claudius, for this clarification. Anna-Eva, is it okay for you if I just go through the chat questions?
Yes, please go ahead, Alexis.
All right. So then we have a comment that sees this is as a very positive progress with the expert panels, but there is a comment on how we will ensure that the opinions from the panels reflect the requirements of the regulations in the legal text. maybe there's a question that is sort of hidden in this comments. So maybe somebody from the expert panels could reply to this question.
Well, you meaning the chat on the examples of departure from the requirements?
So yeah, here the question is, yes, how will the panels, abide by the regulations and the legal text? So,
well, we didn't have that many in orthopedics and trauma yet, so that's. But we had some discussions with two issues, not issues. That's negative, about two examples. But I think the problem, I think, is because we only had very few within orthopedic trauma in my panel, is that we need some guidelines what really clinical evidence is. And so there seems to be now dissociation is a too negative word, but a little wording, legal wording, and some of you are lawyers, you know what I mean. I'm just a simple doctor. Is there's sometimes a discrepancy, but we mean the same. It's about the benefit-risk ratio, and that's what I take account of in daily practice when I put people on my surgery list. That's for a doctor. It means it's very evident. But clinical evidence, I think, an important thing what I was already telling is that we also should harmonize what we consider clinical evidence. And clinical evidence is different for any of these 10 expert panels, different any device. So different for spine implant, a shoulder implant, a hip implant, but different for dentistry, different for meshes. And that's, I think, also one of the tasks that will not overstretch the expertise of the expert panel. But I think that is part of the expertise of the expert panels, because we are the experts panel. At least we are the independent persons who try to improve safety and still have innovation. That's perhaps my more metaphysical answer than a specific answer.
Claudius?
Sorry, if I can just add to the brilliant summary of Rob in terms of course, the big picture really that has to be kept in mind. I think maybe that question also has an undercurrent of how did the Commission and how will EMA ensure in the future that the panels really stay within their mandate. And there, I think it's very important to emphasize that the expert panels have received a lot of guidance documents from us, which is now passed on to EMA, where we really tried, of course, to outline what is the mandate of the panels in the context of these consultations. This mandate is very clearly outlined in the MDR, and of course the Secretariat, the JRC did that, and EMA does it now, ensures, of course, that the mandate is also respected. So I'm just giving a few keywords. The mandate encompasses the sufficiency of the clinical data that is provided, but also the consistency of, for instance, the clinical evidence with the post-market clinical follow-up plan and with the medical indications or the purpose of the devices. And I would also like to highlight that we prepared training materials, which is on the Santé Expert Panel website for the experts. And actually that's for everybody visible. Everybody can look at that and can see what sort of guidance the expert panel experts have received in terms of staying within the mandate. Oliver mentioned an important point. Of course, this is true. The expert panels have a lot of roles, and it's clear they must focus to be effective, and there's enough work to be done, definitely. Thank you.
No, absolutely, Claudius, and I would just maybe add to that EMA, we have great experience in regulating medicines, of course. Now we are supporting the expert panels, and the job of ensuring that expert groups, whether they are these panels or any other expert groups, operate in the context of the regulation. That's really what we're here for in terms of supporting the expert panels. When it comes to the scientific work, this is then the work of the panels to ensure that they follow the standards that are set out, that are laid out for these devices, that there's consistency in the opinions. And I think the opportunity that the panels now provide is it brings the best experts together to define the standards going forward. And as the colleagues have mentioned in the introductions, there's an ambition to to be leading the best possible standards for devices in the EU. So I think it's very good to hear this for the benefits of patients and healthcare professionals. So I'm just going through the next question and just following the order. So there's a question.
Alexi, if I may, Francois Huillet from Eurodis has had his hand up for.
Oh, I thank you. I don't see all the hands. Oliver.
Well, and then Oliver, and then Francois Huillet.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So as Rob said, it is indeed early days for these panels, and as more of the opinions come out, it will be easier to assess the content of them. And Claudius is also correct. The JRC has provided quite extensive training materials to the panel members, all of which is public and good. Nevertheless, to respond to the question that was asked, we have observed one, maybe two things that have made us question whether the panels are strictly operating within the boundaries of the regulation. I can quickly go you through. One of them is actually in the area of in vitro diagnostics, where one of the views, it related basically to a chikungunya test, and the view provided by the expert panels, among its many remarks, was that the manufacturer of that test had only conducted a clinical study or performance evaluation study, as it's called, in Puerto Rico. And they seemed to believe that it's a requirement of the IVD regulation to carry these studies out in Europe. And if that's a correct understanding of what the panel was saying, that is different from what we understand the IVD regulation to require. There is nothing in the regulation about where the studies must be carried out. So that's an example of something where perhaps a little bit of policing about what the panels are doing and how well they understand the scope of our regulations is important. The other example, and it does not relate to an expert panel view published just yet, but it's no secret for those of us who have been following this. Some members of certain panels have been pretty open and public about their wish to see the panels encourage our industry to not only generate clinical evidence for the conventional safety and performance objectives laid down in our regulations, but actually to promote the generation of clinical evidence for things like relative effectiveness and other objectives more laid down in regulations on health technology assessment, etc., which is a fundamentally different kind of exercise, fundamentally different kinds of studies, and as confirmed many times by the European Commission, is not in the scope of our sectoral regulations. So again, effort has been made to train the panelists to ensure they are expert, impartial, etc. But at the end of the day, they are there to do a very defined job and not to do whatever they want. And so just to ensure, again, that their money and time is appropriately used, some degree of policing is important. And I hope the EMA will take that on board as they take over responsibilities for the panels.
Okay.
I don't know if Claudius would like to comment on this, because I see you have your hands raised. Otherwise, I see also that Niall is asking for the floor. But maybe Claudius first, if it is in relation to this.
Yeah, I see Niall and Olga also having their hands up, so I will make it very brief. It's good that we get a lively discussion. Oliver, if I may, I believe that the particular case of chikungunya you mentioned was actually the panel was mentioning also non-vector transmission possibilities. I think that was one of the reasons why that was mentioned, if I remember correctly. And then again, just on the issue of the sort of comparative assessment, I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right. That is an entirely different animal, really, and it shouldn't be mixed in. And the MDR and the IVD are very clear what they want from the expert panels in terms of these consultations. And if you look at the training material and the guidance documents, definitely that is really what we have outlined, and it's not about these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudius. And now, Niall, please.
Thanks, Anna-Eva. I don't have any specific examples to address the question, but I do think it's a very important point that Rob made, about trying to ensure that there is a good understanding across the expert panels of clinical evidence and what requirements there may be. And that's why, while I recognize we need to make sure that the panels can focus on the core activities, that I think it is important to start discussion about common specifications and device guidances, because while they may not necessarily be specific to the devices undergoing consultation through the panels, through the CECP or PECP, they will help to increase the understanding of all of the experts involved about how clinical evidence works under the regulations, and helps to, I guess, set precedent and baseline upon which then knowledge can be built further in terms of how the regulatory system operates to make sure that the panel stays within the system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Niall. I think it is important. I mean, it will be, as we all know, and as what was explained, the panels have been focused, and very rightly so, on the CCPs and the PCPs in the beginning and in this initial phase. We know that there is a long list of activities that could be managed by the expert panel set out in the legislation as such. Where I mean, I think it's very interesting to have different ideas here as well, you know, in terms of seeing what could potentially be the next steps of the panels, while keeping within the legal framework, obviously. But so thank you, and I see that Olga is also asking for the floor.
Thank you. I would like to have also to give a feedback from our side, from the expert side, and to support exactly what Rob and Claudio said. Of course, it is supposed that we justify our opinion based on our scientific expertise, but we have the rules there, and we are, during the training, we have gotten so many informations about which aspects should be taken in consideration in order to justify the opinion or the opposite. And that's why we have to say that the experts, if they are in their medical field, they follow the rules that they are published for this device. And in the case that it's not the point, if somebody doesn't know these rules, then it was very easy at the moment to contact again Claudius and his group and get important information. And at the end, after filling up this document, giving this information, if it will go to the next panel or not, giving this expert information, there's one more step where the Secretariat evaluates again if the opinions that they were given, if they were justified according to the rules. That's why actually we are inside the system. That's why I have to say that it's of course a very important question, but at the moment, during the training material, the experts remain in the system and in the rules of the medical devices.
All right. Thank you, Olga. François from Eurodis.
Yes, thank you. And if I may ask two questions. The one relates to the access to all these evaluation reports, assessment reports. So I understand some will come from the expert panels, others from EMA, and others from notified bodies. And probably Udamade will be the place where to find the reports of interest for the public, if you can confirm this. So that's the post-marketing access to the reports. But regarding all what is pre-marketing, maybe Fergus, if you could remind us the place of these clinical evaluation studies when there are clinical trials, and whether the clinical trial information system will be where we could look for that information. And my second question is, health technology assessment bodies for medicines, they established very important exchange of information with EMA and synergies to exchange information and also for scientific advice. Is the same foreseen for medical devices, or would this be at a later stage? Thank you.
If you like, I'll take the first question from Francois, which is about the link between the clinical trial information system and information on the devices, clinical studies. In fact, MDR requires that there's a link established between the clinical investigation part of Udamade and the medicines clinical trial system, so CTIS. That part of UDEMED is, I understand, under development now. So we're entering into a discussion with the Commission colleagues who are doing that to see how best to establish a link between the two so that people can join the two. There is also cooperation between the MDCG, so the Medical Device Coordination Group, and the Clinical Trial Expert Group, so that the overlaps in the clinical trial parts of the legislation can be addressed.
Okay, thanks, Fergus. On the access to the reports, Claudius, would you be able to help us out here?
Maybe it's better if Anna-Eva could comment on this aspect of the publication.
Yeah, I trust that you are talking about actual opinions by the expert panels. So once they have been delivered, they are published on the Commission website for the time being. They are published in the way as they do not identify the exact device that have been assessed or the manufacturer. That information will follow at the time of the certification. And this is simply an implementation of the legislation in terms of providing as much transparency as possible while still ensuring to keep commercial data not public. So this is the balance that has been taken, but you will find all the opinions that have been delivered so far on the Commission website. For the time being on the Santé website, but I hope that they will soon also be visible on the EMA website. So I hope that clarifies. And I see that Matthias Nidrig also is asking for the floor.
Yes, maybe just a comment also to Oliver's. I think if I understand his complaints right, I think he was thinking that it doesn't matter where the clinical evaluation study was performed. This is actually not the case, at least not for diagnostic studies. So because we have all different areas, different background reactivity. So since we have a different immunological background in the population, and this has a great impact on the specificity of the assay. So therefore, I think it's very important where the clinical evaluation was performed to make a clear to get clear information on the specificity of the test. This is just a comment. Okay. Over.
Hello everyone. I see a lot of interesting questions which are still in the chat, and so I propose we don't continue on that specific topic. We have discussed it quite a bit. We are aware of the concerns that are being raised. There was this question from Francois on HTAs. I must admit I'm not in a good position to answer this. Anna-Eva, are you? Or is it goes beyond really the remit?
Okay, can we maybe invite Francois to take the question orally? That would facilitate a little bit.
Yes, just maybe to repeat. So for medicines, the European network of HT agencies and EMA worked on synergies and identify how to exchange information early in the development and evaluation of medicines to prepare the HT assessment and also parallel scientific advice discussions. My question is whether the same provisions are foreseen for medical devices between the future HTA cooperation and EMA, or of course notified bodies. So I don't know if Marcus Guardian from UNETA is still here, but I can understand that that is maybe more a question for a different forum.
No, thank you, Francois, fully understood. Maybe just to say that I think indeed for the pharmaceutical, the system is a little bit further advanced, if I may say, where we have been piloting scientific advice for quite some time within a cooperation between EMA and the HTA bodies, which is now being codified within the new HTA regulation, where it is actually within the legislation itself. I think we have to acknowledge that on the medical devices side, the scientific advice or the advice to the manufacturers prior to the certification is still a feature in the medical devices regulation that we have not made operational yet. And I heard that there were some interest, including from Oliver here today. And I think that we probably need to launch that work before we can develop and look at whether synergies are to be found here. So yeah, in short, the process is less advanced and less formalized, but I note that there is some interest in this.
No, absolutely. We certainly we see that the way the products are progressing, the convergence between what is a medicine, what is a device, and the fact that these are more and more integrated and interdependent poses this question of how we provide a more integrated way in the future. And we take this step now, and there will be certainly other steps to be taken as we progress. I think it relates to these questions of how we assess, so how we decide. There was a question on an ATMP, so if it's a device or an ATMP, is it a medicine, a device? So, and there's another question on how we evaluate a drug-device combination. So maybe I can give a quick answer in the sense that there are processes to classify ATMPs. So there's a process to decide, is it an ATMP or not, and that will decide the regulatory path that the evaluation takes. And the EMA has a role in this classification process. And then on the combinations, there are mechanisms of consultation when these are integrated devices. There are mechanisms of consultation with the notified bodies and EMA and the national competent authorities for medicines, depending on where the combination is being regulated. And this has been introduced with the new medical device or has been strengthened with the new medical device regulation. And of course, if it is a device, a standalone device, then the expert panels may be involved in this. I don't know if my answer is comprehensive enough. Otherwise, I invite the panelists to maybe add to what I just quickly described. I'm looking at the time, and we still have a question on pediatrics, which I would like that we address. So was this comprehensive enough? Yeah, I see nobody raising the hand, so all right, thank you. So we have a question here on the devices for children. Let me just find it. Sorry, there are so many questions. So there's a concern about the access to market and the fact that we may have some devices that we won't have access anymore. I thought it was on children, but yes, it is. So it was Christine Dehn. I don't know if you wish to intervene yourself directly to raise your concern, Christine. Okay, well then I can read out the question. So it says here that especially the pediatric patients' carers report that important and life-saving devices vanish from the market. So that is a concern of availability. Is there anybody who wishes to comment on this and maybe reassure our patients?
Now I'm not muted anymore, so if you
Right.
want me to, thank you. Now, this question was raised by our pediatric community, and they said that there are medical devices like stents or life-saving catheters or whatever, that they're vanishing from the market and they don't have access anymore, and that the concern from this community is that they are not able to be treated according to the latest standard of the art. And the question is, we had discussions already, and the manufacturers tell us that the problem is that the cost effectiveness for them is not there anymore because these are rare devices. with low production figures. So we are sitting here as patient community in between the chairs because they say it's not financially attractive anymore. Our patients tell us we don't have the devices, and the healthcare professionals agree with this and are really concerned. I have raised this issue with the EMA previously, but I thought, and I have asked for a solution if there can be some considerations how this can be ensured that even if it like a grandfathering system or whatever, I'm not an expert in possible solutions. I just wanted to make sure that these patients are not forgotten. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kristin. Very clear message. Anyone wishes to comment?
Well, the only thing I can say that's also happening even in my department. We are the biggest bone tumor center in the Netherlands, and one of the industry said they did not have any from the MDD to the MDR. They had some problems with their notified body, and even children of 10, 12 years old when they have a Ewing sarcoma, that's a malignant bone tumor. They need it's quality of life saving device, and that's interesting. And some companies took their product off the market. I have personal experiences in my department. But I do not have the answer, but it's happening. So it's really what Christine was telling is happening in at least in the Netherlands.
I don't know if maybe Niall would like to come in on this one.
Thanks, Anna-Eva. I do think it's a very important question and a very important topic that's been raised. And also, I think, a very complex one. I think if you're looking particularly, let's say, at cardiovascular devices in pediatric populations, like Christine has asked about, obviously there potentially are subgroups of devices that are maybe best described as niche medical devices or analogous to what might be called in the medicinal product field orphan medicines, where there is a very small patient population, a very small usage of the medical device on an annual basis. And then obviously when it comes to meeting the costs of compliance with the new regulations, that can be prohibitively expensive. And indeed, many of these things may be developed by smaller companies. I do think there is discussion going on within the regulatory network at MDCG level in relation to this issue. It has been identified as something of concern, but I do think it is something that potentially the expert panels could also have an important role in providing advice on, particularly in arriving at a definition of what could be considered as that type of niche product. Because I guess there are many different other categories of products which maybe are for broader patient populations, have been on the market for a long period of time, and the manufacturer may decide not to proceed with MDR certification or IVDR certification because of the cost. So it's very important, I think, to take a very scientific and clinically focused approach to addressing this really important challenge. And that's why I think the expert panels could have a really important role in helping to define what we should look to put maybe specific provisions in place for. If we look at other regions like FDA, would have things like specific requirements for breakthrough medical devices, which I guess might be a similar type of product. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Niall. I think there are still lots of questions in the chat. Thank you very much for the lively discussion. I think we need to close this session, pass over to Fergus back. I'm sure many questions will come over the coming months, and we will find ways to clarify for our stakeholders going forward. So Fergus, back to you.
So thanks very much, Anna-Eva and Alexis, and really lively discussion. I think it underlines the value of these sessions, and particularly in this area, I think a very technical one, which is perhaps not so well understood across the different stakeholder groups. So one where we're going to need more to build understanding and knowledge of the processes and indeed the challenges that different stakeholders face. I just wanted to give the floor to Paul Piscoy. You had your hand up. I think you said in the chat that you could add a little bit more on clinical studies. So I'd like to give you that opportunity, Paul, if you wish.
Oh, thank you. I was not even waiting for it, so I try to be very, very fast. I'm Paul Piscoy, chair of the Clinical Investigation Evaluation Working Group of the European Commission. Two replies to two questions. The first one, the summary of the clinical investigation will be found in ODAMED. As a matter of fact, the report of a clinical investigation and its summary, both of them will be found in ODAMED. So that was one of the questions. And secondly, the debate on the use of the third country data, I think it's not for today. But I want to let you know that the CIE is looking as we speak, as a matter of fact, because there is a task force on that, aimed to deliver in the autumn also these matters. So the usage of data from third countries will be tackled by this working group. I don't think at the moment there is a yes or no in the legislation itself. But looking at the chat, I think all those comments are very relevant because, of course, the sponsor needs and the manufacturer needs to show that the data obtained is relevant for the population. Having said that, the panels have the duty to look at the data as presented, and they may issue an opinion. But after that, the notified body will look at that opinion and may decide to disagree with that and not follow it. For which we'll have to prove a full justification, for instance, because of the data is indeed useful and has been taken into account into the assessment, because, for instance, the populations have been proven to be similar. As for the role of policing, the experts, we see these panels as being independent, and I don't think the use of word policing would be good. Of course, the Commission and EMA now as Secretariat is paying attention to the work of the panels to be stayed within the mandate. That was my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's very, very useful information. So now perhaps I'll ask colleagues if we can bring up the slide. I can see on a separate screen there's been a lot of things put there as well. And I'll just go down, and if Alexi or Anna, even if you want to jump in on any of these points, please do. But I think some of these are statements rather than questions, and I think really come out of the different discussions we've had already. So involving industry more, cooperation is key in crisis, and we need to cooperate closely, and clearly there'll be many opportunities to have discussions including very specific technical discussions on the different aspects. Positive views, expert panels are operational. It's key to ensure that the opinions issued reflect the requirements of the regulations. Ease scientific advice for industry to better serve innovation. What does a non-binding opinion from expert panels mean in the end? I don't know if somebody wants to briefly comment. I think it's is the education material provided to aid use of devices assessed by expert panels? And then there are a number of others. I don't know if you want to comment, or if there's somebody who wants to comment on the education materials provided to aid use of devices. Are they part of the assessment as well as the scientific data on the device itself?
No.
I think Claudius is asking for the floor.
Claudius.
Somebody said no. That's right. It's not part of the mandate according to the law. So that's not being looked at.
So would that be the notified body then who looks at that afterwards?
Good question.
Okay.
Yes.
Something to learn. I'm beginning. Yes. Thank you for the voice. Paul. Thank you, Paul.
The voice is Paul Piscoy. So apologies, but I think we're running out of time, and I wanted to be super brief.
No, but that's very clear. Okay.
Well, just to make a remark, I think it's also part of the professional attitude of the clinicians. In the Netherlands, it's not mandatory, but it's social pressure which dictates that you should never implant a new hip spine device without any proper training.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we are also professionals. 6 years medical school, 6 years orthopedic surgery training. So at least you can also have some faithful trust in medical specialists in Europe. That's my remark. Or gezond vertrouwen in Dutch.
Thank you. So scroll down a little bit more. I think we're coming coming close to the end, really. There were a number of comments here. There's one about our 3D printing implants. So I guess the implants would be the devices, and other questions. There were some questions also in the chat about evaluating software as a medical device. And I don't know if they're in scope, but I think at this point I'd hand back to Alexia and Anna-Eva just to wrap up this session. Then I'll move on to wrap up the meeting overall.
Yep.
But lots of future discussion, I think, there to be had. Alexi.
I mean, of course, this event, the time is limited, and the question beyond what we can now all address. It's clear that there is, as we will progress, there is an opportunity for the panels to provide guidance. I mean, this is part of what the regulation establishes. So certainly, guidance to manufacturers in terms of the innovative devices and all of that, for sure. This will be needed, and we will be looking at how we will do that in the future as we establish and strengthen these panels. It's fairly still new, so we need to watch the space how we are supporting that. And Anna-Eva, you want to close?
No, thank you. I don't have so much to add at this stage, but I think it was a very rich and interesting discussion. And I'm really glad to see that there is a huge interest in the work of the expert panels. As I said in the beginning, we really see the expert panels as a very essential part of the new regulatory framework, and they will continue to play a very important role. I mean, so far we have just a few opinions delivered, but I'm sure that we will see more of the expert panels in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much for all the participants, for all the input and questions, and for the panel for having provided some clarification. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Anna-Eva, Alexia, and the whole panel for a really lively discussion, and our audience as well for so many questions. And certainly apologies we haven't been able to cover the rich landscape that your questions and entries in the chat have indicated, and clearly these kind of sessions are a really important tool in our engagement with everybody, and building all our understanding of both the legislation, how it works, and of the challenges that stakeholders are facing. So we still do hope that this meeting has left us all with a better understanding of the regulation itself, the EMA's due responsibilities, the immediate actions we're taking in transitioning from the current situation to the implementation of the new tasks and activities, but also in building our understanding of the challenges that the various stakeholders, industry, patients, healthcare professionals face in these areas. And it's really a complex landscape that's covered, a very broad landscape. So we've heard from session one on shortages that the regulation has become applicable on the 1st of March, and we will starting really now to operate under that new legislation on the monitoring and mitigation of shortages. We're transitioning from ad hoc structures and processes to those now formalized by the regulation, and this formalization really recognizing the good work that has been carried out already by all the actors involved. The agency starting the preparatory work to ensure a smooth and efficient delivery of the ESMP, the European Shortages Monitoring Platform, in early 2025. Big challenge, and one we will need still a lot of discussion on to make sure we can deliver something that works and gives what is needed. For critical medical devices, preparatory work is ongoing to set up the necessary structures and processes by 2nd of February 23, and the agency is working also to establish the necessary interactions with stakeholders in those fields of devices. So the new mandate provides tools to prevent shortages of medicines and ensure supply in emergencies, and in first time then extending this also to monitoring devices through these structures. So that's a very good move, and one we've seen with the experience of the last 2 years. So it is really important. We then went on to hear about the emergency task force. We've seen a lot about the activity of the COVID-19 emergency task force over the last several years, and this is now formalizing and giving strength to and some new roles to the emergency task force. It's legally established with new tools to facilitate and accelerate the approval of medicines in emergencies, building on the lessons learned from COVID-19. Obviously, continuing work now in the context of the current pandemic as well. The importance of preparedness has been emphasized. The ETF will have a leading role to coordinate preparedness and for the medicines to address new public health emergencies and horizon scanning and looking at what needs to be addressed, looking at emerging outbreaks which might or might not develop into a public health emergency, but we need to be ready for those. Links to the clinical trials and clinical trial regulation really important. We've heard quite a bit in that session about the important steps that are being taken in support of advice to developers, but also the need to advise academia and help to reinforce the conduct of large multinational studies and platforms that can be used to test new products or repurposing existing products to fight these public health emergencies and make those able to trials that can be advised on, authorized and really set up and conducted in a rapid way, because pandemics move fast and we need to be able to respond and provide information to give good decision making. Improve collaboration and coordination across all stakeholders, EU agencies, DG HERA, DG Sante, clinical trial groups, the CTCG and the CTAG, ECDC, and really improving preparedness and response to emergencies. And from session 3 then on the medical devices expert panels, the expert panels are one of the tools in the new MDR to improve safety and performance of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, as well as transparency for patients and healthcare professionals. And we've heard a little bit of the transparency as well, which will come with Udamed, so providing more information. Under the new extended mandate, expert panels activities are under the coordination of EMA, and implementation is being done on a stepwise process now. With our extensive experience in coordinating expert groups, EMA will be able to meet its new roles expectation, which will complement EMA's mission. I think a number of the other activities that we have in reaching out, for instance, to SMEs can also complement this activity. EMA's new mandate strengthens the preparedness for major public health crisis and provides more resilience for the availability of devices through its advisory role on the critical medical devices. And our coordination of the expert panels will lead to a more integrated and synergistic approach to the management of scientific panels for devices, which will help improve public health protection for the entire Union. We've certainly collected very rich feedback today on these different aspects and gained a better understanding of your expectations and concerns. I think that's really important. There are going to have to be more of these kind of sessions, perhaps more focused ones as well on the different aspects. But we'd like to leave you with a number of messages. And I think the close collaboration between Commission, DG Sante and DG HERA, EMA and ECDC, and the complementary work, as I illustrated in a slide early this morning, that we're all working to ensure that the work we do is complementary and that we provide and ensure that the next time a public health threat hits the EU, we have adequate platforms for support, coordination and evaluation of all aspects relating to medicines and devices. And this clearly has a lot of preparedness work so that we're ready and can move quickly when a next public health emergency hits. Stakeholder engagement, communication, transparency, and international cooperation will continue to be critical functions, not only in crisis response, but also in our collective preparedness to face the challenges ahead. And as has been emphasized, and it's really been very good to have the participation today and really active discussion also with the patient and healthcare professional representatives. These are key to the agency's regulatory processes now through input of scientific knowledge and specific knowledge, real life experience, Accordingly, the new mandate ensures opportunities for involvement of patients and healthcare professionals, in addition to the already well-established platforms for dialogue, the Patient and Consumers Working Party and Healthcare Professional Working Party. They have representatives in the ETF and as part of the MSSG and MDSSG also. Industry stakeholders are also key to making the new mandate a success. There are a number of new tasks for industry linked to reporting responsibilities and setup of industry contact points for critical medicines. EMA has established a standing group with industry stakeholders to provide regular updates on the state of implementation of the extended mandate, and we can use these platforms and processes really to further understand the issues and find the way forward and the best way forward to make all of this work. As always, we count on the regulatory network, our partners and stakeholders to work together for a smooth and successful implementation of the legislation. And EMA remains open to a continued dialogue on the best way forward. So really, thank you for the very active dialogue today. I think it illustrates the enormous interest, but the enormous willingness of everybody to contribute, to identify the issues, but also to identify the solutions. So thank you, and we really look forward to more dialogue. It's essential. So on a practical note, a recording of the meeting will be published on our website in a few days for the benefit of those not able to watch today or who may want to go back and listen again or share with colleagues. So look out for that, and really just thank you very much again to all our presenters, panelists, chairs, and the hugely engaged audience we've had from all communities. Excellent. Thank you, and have a good evening and weekend.